Welcome back to Clean Titans. Today we're diving to the future with two visionaries, Rakesh Koneru CEO and Vinay Jayachand, Chief Technology and Product Officer, the founders of Hummingbird EV. Rakesh and Vinay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ali. Appreciate you having us on the show.
Likewise. Thanks, Ali.
Please introduce yourselves and tell us a little about your background and how you became interested in commercial vehicle electrification. Starting with Rakesh.
Sure. Again, thanks everyone for whoever's joining the podcast and listening it. Again, this is Rakesh. I come in from the electrification background with over 15 years of experience, primarily in the electrification of the medium and the heavy duty commercial vehicle segment. Since my graduation, the space that I've been involved in is the electrification of the bigger class of vehicles. I've been personally involved in many first of kind projects in the US. Prior to Hummingbird as well, we were part of a company called EVI where we built the commercial trucks for UPS, Frito-Lay. We worked heavily with service utility companies like PG&E. We were the first team who's deployed vehicle to grid in this space as well. We worked with Department of Defense. So a lot of application driven vehicle platforms is what our specialty has always been. And what got us start our own ventures about 10 years back is Hummingbird is to build a modular vehicle platform that can be tailor-made to specific use cases. Because what we have seen is while the electrification is being done at a commercial scale, it's nascent still in the vehicle segment that we're focused on. And everyone's only looking at electrification more from a specific product or a consumer or a region standpoint, but not something that's being vertically built. So we at Hummingbird, our focus has always been to build a vertically integrated technology which can really be scaled globally at a minimum with a reduced capex compared to traditional manufacturing. And that's what drove us to really start off Hummingbird and be where we are today.
Vinay?
So, my name is Vinay Jayachand. I'm the co founder, Chief Technology and Product Officer at Hummingbird. So, my background is mainly in control systems and electrical engineering. Since childhood, I've always been passionate about building technology for anything that moves. I've been in the automotive space pretty much since I graduated with my master's degree from NYU. I've worked with tier one OEMs like Cummins and Kenworth in the non electrification space, but again, mostly in the medium and heavy duty commercial vehicle market space. I moved to California in 2012, 2013 timeframe. That's when, like Rakesh mentioned, I was also part of EVI, where we were one of the first guys looking at electrification of commercial vehicles. It really got me exciting from that point onwards to really take up the entrepreneurial journey in the EV space, focused more on reducing the carbon emissions and the NOx emissions for the commercial transportation industry. So when we look at the overall emission controls, it's only going to get more and more stringent. And with us being in California and with the regulations in California and what's being adopted worldwide in both US as well as in Europe and other parts of Asia, it's inevitable that at some point there needs to be electrification solutions which is scalable and more dominant. So we still see that my main drive is to build solutions that can move the entire industry towards sustainable transportation. And being more creative and understanding the customer and the market is the need of the hour right now.
We're excited to have you both. Hummingbird EV is at the forefront of electrifying commercial transportation, a critical step in our journey towards a sustainable future. To start, could you give audience a brief overview of Hummingbird EV's mission?
Sure, I'll start off, Ali. We've been in California for 10 years. The primary intent and the focus for Hummingbird is to build a vertically integrated vehicle platform that can be scaled to any commercial vehicle application and use case globally. Now, with that said, the primary driver for us has always been focused heavily into the tech. We wanted to build the technology first before we go to the market with what Hummingbird has to offer. So we had been in stealth mode for the good part of 9 years, while at the same time we come in from the electrification background and we've discussed right over 15 years of experience, each one of us here. So we know the in and out of the market requirements, the expectations from the customer, the price points, and really what's stopping the mass adoption, slowing down the mass adoption of the commercial EVs, right? So we've seen the different products and the companies that's out there, and we've strongly believed in building a technology which is vertically integrated and at the same time a modular vehicle platform while keeping it low on capex. This has been the primary focus, and the whole tech stack has been built more towards accomplishing the final goal of what we're trying to finally do here. And what you'll see is over the past 10 years, we have taken our electrification experience into different vehicle applications. So at Hummingbird, we built the first mining vehicles for underground mines. And our technology has been instrumental where it's been deployed in mines across China as we speak, and over 500 mining vehicles being driven on a daily basis, right? So that's how we started off. So it was, when you look at the tech stack of it, that's probably the most complicated application which needs a very stringent use case. We're talking about underground mines, explosion proof certifications, and a lot of things that come along with it. So that was really our stepping stone to sort of taking the base platform that we'd built for the mining and tailor make it to other use case applications where, again, with us being in California, there is a lot of flexibility for us to really drive the innovation with the state of California heavily invested into such technologies. We were actually the first guys who's done electrification of ag tractors, electrification of refrigerated trucks on a Class 8 platform. So the whole idea for us with working with California was to bring in the modularity of our systems into different vehicle platforms where if it's a tractor or a truck or a mining vehicle, the hardware to us stays constant where we tailor make it to the application demand, right? So think about it like a Lego block where we can add a piece or delete a piece from a hardware standpoint, giving the right use case to the right application at the right cost. So this is what we've tried to do. With California, the primary driver in the past has been more towards showcasing a net zero farm concept, right? Where if we can zero out the first 0 to 200 miles of emissions, where from the tree to the table sort of concept. We've built electrification of tractors. We've done vehicle to vehicle integration to power up these tractors with our trucks. And we've also done the refrigerated trucks with zero emissions, taken from the tree from the warehouse to packaging to the distribution side. This is what we've tried to accomplish over the past 7 years, and we've built about 15 vehicles so far here in the States, 500 in China, mostly on the mining vehicle space, and we have a couple vehicles that we've done in India more as a retrofit to sort of gauge the performance and the capabilities of what our systems are capable of right now. Now we're at the stage where we were heavily invested as an engineering company. We've built tech that's vertically integrated from a technology standpoint, from battery till charging station, UI, UX, telematics, embedded hardware, embedded software. Minus the auxiliary loads, we control the whole tech stack, which is very modular in our case. And we're transitioning as a company to where, with the knowledge that we've gained, with the data that we've collected over years in different fields, we're more getting streamlined towards a specific market entry towards being a vertically integrated vehicle OEM in the next 5 years.
Nice. Wow, over 500 mining vehicles. That's impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
Were you guys involved in that very large dump truck that goes up and down and it charges itself going downhill?
No, not particularly to that application. So we had a very unique use case where these trucks are primarily used in the coal mines, underground mines, and they have hydraulic load requirements and the bed requirements are pretty complex. While at the same time, they also have people movers, which basically transport people in and out of mines. So it's a different use case for core mining applications that they do in China.
It eliminates the vehicle emissions inside the mines. So
That's actually one of the big driving force was the emission regulations, especially in China, are pretty stringent nowadays. And we worked with a legacy OEM who's been doing this from a diesel standpoint over a few decades. And we had a very unique opportunity in the use case where we can really reduce the emissions, not only the emissions part of it, but we bring in a lot of peripherals with fast onboard charging and few other things in how we can monitor the vehicles in real time basis.
Hummingbird EV is operating across multiple continents. Can you elaborate on the strategic importance of having a global presence in the EV commercial vehicles market?
We can definitely elaborate on that. So while the electrification is happening, it's more at a commercial scale when it comes to the consumer market segment, right? When it comes to a commercial market segment, a truck may look the same to you, but it's completely application driven, right? So an e-commerce would use it for a completely different application from a ports vehicle and someone who's taking food and produce on the freeway. So it's a very broader scope of the use cases, unlike the consumer vehicle industry, right? So now with that said, what is also very important to understand is that application changes from region to region. Forget about us being global for 1 second. Even within the US, the drive cycle requirements of what you need to do a set job in California, given the climate, given the terrain, the humidity, and all the working conditions that we have in California, for example, or West Coast, an example, is completely different to the East Coast, right? So, what is very important for everyone to understand is if the adoption has to scale up, there needs to be flexibility in what you provide to the end user in different markets. So that is key for us. So initially, we've started off not to get into the global dominance part of it, but we've really started to focus on primarily on the US market segment. And when we've started to look at the different use cases in different environments, it became very important for us to build something that's modular. So that was the starting point. Once we had the base tech built the right way, which we believe is what can be commercialized in volumes, then we've started to look at the overseas markets, right? So, given where we are today, while the US is focused on commercialization, our duty cycle requirements and our volumes are to be very realistic. It's not to the scale that would really help a commercial vehicle company, right? So, with that said, we've started to focus heavily investing into the tech in the US while positioning the company as a US brand, US company with US manufacturing. At the same time, we wanted to look at the growing markets, or in other words, it's volume markets, right? So when you look at volume markets outside of the Western countries, pretty much there is a huge vacuum there. So we quickly realized that there's a first mover advantage where, with the unique piece of tech, we can globally place ourselves. Where we have the first mover advantage in a lot of cases. In other cases, the only counter competition that we have is Chinese guys, right? So if we play it right, we're trying to go into these other markets where we see volumes over the next 5 to 10 years, which can really propel the mass commercialization and also enable us to start reducing the supply chain costs and bring the price down to a diesel counterpart in the next 3 to 5 years. That's the vision. It's more towards driving the volumes. How fast can we get it to the price parity of a diesel? And how can we accomplish the volumes and be realistic where the demand is?
And do you have any involvement in Oslo? They're trying to electrify all their commercial vehicles.
Not currently at this stage. I think our focus is more on when it comes to the electrification, we're taking a step by step approach. We're foundationally well set up here in the US. So, first step for us is to scale the operational capabilities and get into the US market where we can start producing about 300 trucks per year within by the end of this year. That's the vision of where we're trying to get into in the US. While at the same time, our other market focus is primarily going to be around GCC and the India markets. We have very unique partnerships, some in works, some are solidified, which can really get us into the volumes of the GCC, which enables us to get into the Africa markets, while the India gets us into the Southeast Asian market. So these three are our primary focus areas to begin with.
And there's a lot happening in India. They're moving fast in electrification.
And I think that's where the first mover advantage comes in for us. As a US tech company with years of experience, we're having very good discussions, and we've recently signed up an MOU with one of the largest e-commerce customer in India. So we're slowly seeing that drive for getting the emissions down in the country, and the policies are very aggressive, especially in India. So that's partly the reason why, without us doing any marketing or minimal marketing, there's a huge volumes that we've already seen, and we want to capitalize on that.
Excellent. Your company focuses on a comprehensive approach from full electric vehicle to modular batteries and software. What are the key technological innovations that set Hummingbird EV apart from its competitors?
So, Ali, Hummingbird, like Rakesh mentioned, we've been technologically driven right from the onset. So, the company stands pretty tall when it comes to the entire IP portfolio that we've built over the last 9 years. So, if I have to really break it down into the four main segments, we started off trying to control the core components of the powertrain systems, like the battery pack systems, the power electronics, and the vehicle integration systems. Right. So the main driving reason for this is to bring in the modularity. When you have a modular adaptable design, what it allows you to do is build different vehicle platforms, and at the same time, when the company has a larger vision on the globalization, when we want to have our presence across the globe, it allows us to enter into new markets like India, GCC, like we just spoke about. And the whole vertical integration aspect for us really plays a key role in positioning Hummingbird as a technology player. So we focused a lot on building modular battery pack systems, but in the recent years, we've sort of pushed the boundary where we've also tried to structurally integrate the battery pack systems onto the chassis frame. So where it basically allows for reduced assembly time, and it improves the service turnaround as well. And it allows for better scalability, and it reduces the OPEX as well. Battery has been sort of the core area of focus for Hummingbird right from the onset. And right now we are at a stage where we are pretty much using prismatic lithium cells, specifically LFPs. And the energy density and the power densities have only gotten better with time. And we see a significant reduction in cost that just happened in the last couple of years. And that trend seems to continue over the course of the next decade. So for us, we're pretty agnostic to the type of cell. Tomorrow, there could be solid state batteries, there could be other new inventions in terms of material science. But where Hummingbird's focus is how do we efficiently and seamlessly integrate these cells into modules and pack designs, and how do we thermally allow these cells to be managed very well for different drive cycles and different environmental conditions. I think that's where we've built a lot of IP, trade secrets, and patents around it. Now, the second dimension is the bidirectional power conversion systems. So when we started to work on the mining vehicle application or for the food and agriculture market, one of the key focus was how can we allow the vehicle to be better utilized than just for driving and charging. So at the end of the day, this is an asset, and the end user has to monetize from the asset, even if the vehicle is not really productive or has reduced operational loads. So that's where we started to focus on building systems where we could reuse a lot of the existing components on the vehicle towards very interesting applications like vehicle charging and other vehicle to load applications. And we demonstrated this back in 2019, where we powered electric tractors with a Class 6 vehicle that was housing a bigger battery pack. And most recently, we moved the solution from an off road application like the agriculture sector towards an on road application for somebody like AAA, where it could be utilized towards providing mobile energy on demand for the end user. And this again is into a specialty vehicle segment on the on-road side, but it's giving that extra benefit to that end user and creating that niche application for itself. And this is all happening without any added systems on the vehicles, right? So there have been some legacy players who've done this, where they carry a battery pack on a F450 or a 550 and then transfer the power. But what we are trying to do is utilize existing EVs and make it empower them to basically transfer power or energy in a mobile way. So that's going to be a continued focus for us as we also look at other markets. And the third dimension is software has really played a key role in where Hummingbird is today. A lot of our solutions, Hummingbird pretty much controls the entire digital software stack between the battery management system, the traction control, the powertrain controls, vehicle integration unit, and the body control unit. So all of these are seamlessly working together. And since we have the autonomy over the entire technology stack, it's allowed us to better serve the customer with their dynamic needs, where we don't have to constantly be working with our suppliers in order to make dynamic changes in real world environments. And with the advancements with OTA updates, it's just gotten more seamless and more effective in helping our customers with their requirements. So these three have always been the core of what's allowed Hummingbird to be a revenue generating company, focusing on different market segments across the globe. And most recently, the heart of our innovation has been in building our first lightweight, high strength platform, which we internally have coined it as Intelligent Adaptive Chassis. It's basically an IAC platform. It's a chassis platform which is 40% lighter than steel. We've basically built two prototypes of this platform, which seamlessly integrates battery pack systems and powertrain systems in a plug and play fashion. And the main goal or the drive for us to go one step further is we saw that customers today were really not happy with legacy solutions where they have to compromise on payload. They have to range anxiety is still an issue because the charging infrastructure is still not developed for the truck market, which has bigger battery packs in the order of 300 kilowatt hour or above. So our main goal is how can we make it more efficient by increasing the range, but at the same time, how can we enable the customer to not compromise on the payload? So we've built a chassis frame with a composite material. Think of it as it has the same strength, which is closer to the carbon fiber level, but it's not as expensive as carbon fiber. So we've, in the last couple of years, we've worked with a lot of local players like Strongwell on the composite side in order to create a recipe for the material. And at the same time, where it gets very interesting is the whole chassis is put together in with a very low capex. So if you think of the legacy foundries that build chassis, you need investments in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. We could build a 50,000 square foot facility with $10 million investment, and we can churn out 50,000 units of these frames per year, because the whole process of putting this together is completely different from the legacy processes of there is no welding, there's no heat treatment, there is no painting, there's no bending. None of those processes are really there. These are rectangular tubes that just come out of a pultrusion line, and the whole recipe is in how we choose the kind of fiber and how we orient them and how we set up the entire process to these rectangular tubes to be churned out of the line. And after that, we just use certain casted pieces and how we put together using adhesives rather than just using fasteners. So that whole approach of building a chassis frame is something that we've reinvented, and which is very not very specific to EVs in general. This is a frame that could even encompass fuel tanks tomorrow. So the whole geometry and the material science used for this chassis is completely novel and something for the future, the way we envision that the whole, which is the need of the for the sustainable transportation market, as you could call it.
So it's all one piece, the
It's
chassis.
all one.
Perfect.
So we
And it
haven't really put this on our website yet, but there is a video on YouTube for your audience who could look at the Hummingbird channel and how this whole chassis comes together right from the raw material. So that's an interesting process that we've invented at Hummingbird. So it's worth to take a look at it.
nice. And the AAA charging vehicle you mentioned, is that like AAA guy coming to a stranded person with a gallon of gasoline to get them going, or is
Yeah,
it more
absolutely.
substantial than that?
No, it's multifold there. So let's say you have an EV, you're stranded on the road. Either they could charge you up, give that boost charge, and get you to the nearest charging station, or they could tow your truck, and while they're towing, they could even charge your truck, right? So yeah, multiple use cases. It's more efficient this way. It allows for somebody like AAA to also have an electric fleet for themselves because their operation is also pretty limited in terms of range, and it's only in a particular radius within a city, right, or a county. So it's a perfect use case in terms of electrification and providing that additional, it's a cherry on the cake.
The commercial vehicle sector has unique demands compared to passenger EVs. What are the biggest challenges Hummingbird EV faces in adapting EV technology for the commercial applications?
We've been in this industry for long, right? So we've seen the entire industry grow right from time frame. Back then, you had only somebody like Tesla in the electrification space, but again, they were in a different market space altogether, building cars. But if you really look at emission controls, not many players are still there today looking at electrification of commercial vehicles, right? So one of the main or couple main issues towards electrification of commercial vehicles is today your legacy mindset of how an OEM operates. Building a vehicle is completely different from what an EV vehicle really needs, right? So if I'm building a diesel vehicle, I go to somebody like Cummins, I can get the entire engine, fuel system, exhaust system in one package. And it's only the auxiliaries that needs to be integrated, and it's very supplier driven. When it comes to EVs, if the whole intent is to really reduce the cost and have that cost parity with diesel, it's very important for OEMs to control a large part of the powertrain piece by themselves, and especially the software stack. Now, when you look at how the dealerships look at what the customer requires. Like, for example, we are in the truck space, right? So you have the OEMs, you have the dealerships, and you have the end customers. So the end customers are basically looking at certain solutions from dealerships, which is not really well understood by the OEM. So there is communication gap, there is a layer. And of course, somebody like Tesla has gone that approach of selling directly to the consumer. But building a vehicle that's very centric to the customer in a particular region is the need of the hour, right? And I don't think there are many OEMs today who are able to tackle this issue, because let's say from the range perspective, from the payload perspective, you need to think of building a vehicle in a completely different way. So you have to start with a clean sheet of paper, and your existing infrastructure that exists for building a vehicle also needs dynamic change. Whether it's your production line, whether it's the kind of tooling, whether it's the quality check, everything requires a significant change in the current ways of operation. So it's more easy definitely for startups than for legacy players, because adapting something that's already existing as infrastructure is tough. But at the same time, aspect is the vehicle build, right? The design and the production of the vehicle. The other aspect is the infrastructure. So that's where solutions like V2X is really key. We cannot completely keep relying on the grid infrastructure to these vehicles. We've gone to end customers to put up a fleet of vehicles. The lead time for grid infrastructure upgrades is almost a year, right? So it doesn't allow scalability in terms of adopting EVs for any fleet manager, right, or any individual owner as well. So that's been a key problem, right? So that's where energy using battery solutions is going to be key on how you offset some of these issues.
Yeah, can install some solar trackers, bank, and a battery storage bank anywhere
Right.
in a remote area,
Yeah.
and they're good to go. Any real world examples or anecdotes from the field you can share?
So, see, we go back to the experience we had in the ag space, right? So, when, primarily the reason why we had initially focused in the ag space is it's one of the most complex and remote locations that you can get into, right? With grid limitations and the stability of the grid and the quality of the grid. So, when we've really looked at the solutions out there that can zero out the emissions for the ag space, what we have seen is, if I'm an end user, if I own a farm, right, I manage from tractors to trucks to refrigeration units. In California, pretty much most of the farms now already have solar or in process of getting them into the grid. Now, if I need to go towards electrification, the problem has always been, what we've seen is there's not one solution to an end user that can come in and give them just the vehicles, right? And that can be keyed on and it works seamlessly in their operations, right? So either they have to go buy a truck from someone, solar from someone, work with PG&E on the grid side of it, or tractors from X entity. Then they need to work on the fueling sort of a thing, right? So it's very complicated. So what this is what we have noticed firsthand, right? And so what we've tried to do really is bring in that closed loop ecosystem in a much smaller scale, where we've really tried to understand the use case of the tractors. Now, from a battery size to the envelope in footprint of the tractor, everything was really case studied with us going in the field, trying to understand each and every minute application on what exactly is needed. Okay, they just drive? Do they use sprayers? Do they use rigs? Do they tow with it? Or do they have any auxiliary loads outside of spraying? Right. So we've really gotten into the dirty details of what the application was. And then we went back to the drawing board and we worked with a tractor OEM and little bit tweaked that envelope on the chassis side of it to make it work for their application. We got to a point where we've built the tractors to be software driven to cater it to multiple applications, right? So we were tuning the tractor from 30 horsepower to a 50 horsepower configuration, all by a software change, while we've kept the hardware stack the same. Right now, when we went to the fueling aspect of the tractor, and these locations are huge, over acres, thousands of acres. So, how do you charge the tractors? That's where we've gotten in and we said, okay, you cannot expect these guys at the end of the day to go find a barn which has the grid and tied to that barn is, and it doesn't really materialize, right? So that's when we've really looked at the current fueling systems, which were the diesel tractors. They were getting fueled up in the field by a trailer on an F550 truck, right? So So then we're like, okay, how do we bring the energy to the tractor so they don't have to really change the operations of how they work around it, right? And at the end of the day, that's how we've really gotten into this unique vehicle to vehicle that Vinay had through earlier. So what when we looked at it as a holistic thing, we've looked at the number of tractors they have, the applications they have, the trucks they have, the fueling supply they have, the energy source they have, how reliable is that energy source, to where you don't have to really go to PG&E and upgrade the grid, but with the existing infrastructure they already have, how can we deploy 10 trucks and 5 tractors? It was a more comprehensive to where we've really it's important for anyone to understand not only the use case, but also where the power is coming from and bridge that gap to where you're not leaving it to the end user to go figure it out.
Just to add on as well, it was the same situation in the mines. Whenever a vehicle goes into the mines, they cannot set up infrastructure because of the limited space as well, even if the power is available. So having vehicles like a mobile fueler that could go charge these other vehicles was a game changer for those guys. So there are different ways in which you could really enable the fleet managers and other early adopters of EVs to empower them to have such solutions in place, which takes care of the limitations on the grid side. And that's certainly one key aspect to look at for any OEM in the future.
Are there any electrified farms in California?
There are few, but I think, again, it's a very complicated and complex environment, right? So, from the grid side of it, like I said, many of the farms, sizable farms, are already equipped with solar and batteries, and few are actually tied with wind and everything, what comes with those. But from the vehicle standpoint, I think no one's really focused on doing trucks at a commercial scale. Unfortunately, Vinay was trying to say before, right? So most of the legacy players are only building trucks to compliance. Unfortunately, they're not really in it as of today because they don't see the volumes, right? So that's more on the truck side of it. But when it comes to the tractors, it's been more. Caterpillar has few electric tractors, and there's a couple of handful of startups who's tried to do electrification on the tractors. But see, they're all very focused on a specific product, right? So, for example, either a vineyard, right, which needs a lower duty cycle requirement. But again, it's not hobby farming, where these tractors were primarily used for hobby farming, right? So a solution that can work and replace the diesel side of electrification on the tractors has not happened in California. There's been few demonstration projects. And on the vehicle side, on the truck side, again, the compliance aspect of it, where you have a fixed battery pack with a fixed power output, with a fixed payload, that sort of a rigid manufacturing really did not help to scale on the truck segment of it either. If there is any reducing the emissions in scale, mostly it's only being done on the grid end as of today in California.
How does Hummingbird EV address the issue of battery life cycle and sustainability, especially in the context of large-scale commercial vehicle deployment?
I think where we're getting to with the batteries in general, Ali, is the notion of batteries breaking down and frequently needing to change the battery. I think that's not the issue anymore as much as it was over a decade back. The batteries are pretty reliable now to where we've seen in use cases where the minimum duty cycle requirement will get you at least minimum of 5, maximum of 8 years of first-hand use case without you seeing any considerable drop in the range and the efficiency of what the batteries can offer. So that gives you some perspective out of a 15-year duty cycle of a truck. If you say take 15 years duty cycle of a truck, we're saying the batteries are already today up to 8 years. Now, in that 8 years, when you compare it with a diesel, even a diesel engine would be needing to get tuned or replaced or with the amount of miles that
Millions of miles.
so it's getting to a point where over the next couple of years, it's going to be one-to-one relation with how long batteries can last compared to a diesel. But what's good with the batteries is before you even talk about recycling them, there's always an afterlife batteries, right? So for us, again, because Hummingbird is not just being a vehicle company, we are also looking at how do we provide so-called opportunity charging or mobile charging or energy on demand. It allows us to take the 70% duty cycle left battery, for example, into the other markets, whether we do microgrids tomorrow, whether we get into our own infrastructure tomorrow, or when we expand the mobile fast charging, we will be in a position to use these second life batteries back into our ecosystem on some other vehicle platforms or some other infrastructure platforms till we get to a point of they're not usable anymore. So to us, that not usable is only when if we hit 40% of the overall efficiency or the overall capacity of the battery. That's when good part is over the past 4 to 5 years, there's many startups who's into the recycling of batteries in an eco-friendly environment. Many have come up in Nevada where we constantly make sure that these already always go back to a recycle location where they can extract the raw material away from the cells and reuse them to make new cells, right? So we're trying to sort of close in that loop again where we're the first user will also be the second user. And when it comes to the recycling aspect of it, we're partnering up with few players who can recycle it and get it back into the loop as a battery again.
So you already have an infrastructure for second life of the batteries. And that's what most people don't realize is that EV batteries outlast the vehicles. But for commercial usage, of course, at some point you'll have to replace them, but then you can use them in your battery charging or in your standalone BESS application.
For our applications and the market focus that we're focused on, Ali, is see, we're not trying to get into long haul trucking, right? So the whole goal for us is at least in the next 5 years, we'll stay focused on the first 0 to 300 miles of range before the truck needs to get a charge, right? So now when you really look at that 300 miles, you're looking at about 3,000 miles over a month and 36,000 miles over a year. And over 10 years, you're looking at about at the most you're doing 400,000 miles, right? So with the batteries in general, my 5 to 8 year is very, it's not optimistic time, right? So the batteries today, there's data points from Tesla's oldest vehicles where they've driven 400,000 miles and without a problem. And these batteries are getting better and better in terms of the energy density and the quality of making sure the repetitiveness in that process, the quality control is always there. We see over the next 5 years where the in this 0 to 300 miles, you shouldn't really replace a battery for the life cycle of how much the truck is rated to, right? Which is typically about 12 to 15 years. So we see that happening already. And I think we really don't see batteries breaking down in future or getting into the replacements.
Right. I was talking to a battery expert from Volta Foundation a few days ago, and they just keep getting better and better. The charging speeds gets faster, and the price keeps coming down. And the trend, as you were talking about the chassis, it's towards integration of batteries with the chassis.
Yeah, yeah.
For motorcycles or vehicles, just cars or the commercial large vehicles.
True.
So, Vinay, as Chief Technology Officer, you're at the heart of Hummingbird EV's innovations. What's your vision for the future of commercial EV technology?
Yeah, as the CTO, Ali, my main vision is to create a fully integrated, intelligent, and scalable EV ecosystem. Hummingbird in general has a vision to not only provide a vehicle to the end customer and walk off, right? I think it's important for us to build that whole ecosystem which allows dealerships and end customers to use our vehicles. And then we want to have that close loop relationship with them in terms of either it could be also educating them in how to utilize this vehicle so that it can be used for at least a 10-year period, like we were talking about, and also enable the customer to have that ecosystem in place, whether we do it ourselves or we work with other partners, right? And at the same time, as far as the company is concerned, because we are a vertically integrated company, we've been able to build very creative revenue models. So, like I was saying before, we have our own verticals in terms of product lines when it comes to batteries, powertrain systems integrated onto a chassis application, and the complete vehicle product itself. So that there are different layers of technology that is built into the vehicle, and a lot of it is in some way or the other controlled by Hummingbird. Now, the main goal here or the vision here is to create multiple revenue streams for Hummingbird internally as well, right? So when we are getting into other markets like India or Philippines or other South Asian countries or even GCC, we are also open to work with other OEMs in order to work with them either with our entire platform, where let's say if there is an OEM, there is a particular market or a customer base that they understand better, we are totally open to enabling them with our technology platform so that they can cater to their customer needs. So it's basically to create technology for the entire ecosystem that's more scalable. That's going to be the goal going ahead. And of course, we just have to keep getting better in terms of we're just pushing the boundaries in terms of our efficiencies, in terms of the performance of the vehicle, the robustness of the vehicle. And because the other industries are also exponentially growing. For example, the semiconductor industry is growing with tremendous speed in terms of today the memory, the processing bandwidths on some of these processors allow us to build power converters with a lot of different features that can enable the customers to explore multiple applications. And at the same time, a lot of the AI driven solutions can also be plugged into our UIX or infotainment platforms, where we are able to allow our customers to understand the vehicle better with data, get into something like predictive maintenance, provide analytics for warranty information and so forth. I think it brings a lot of transparency that way. So there are a lot of other pockets that we are extremely interested to explore with the advancements that's happening, especially at the energy front and the AI front. And how can we make our vehicle more connected, right? So at the end of the day, you saw how the car market has really taken off with EVs, right? And it's not just about driving an EV; it's that whole experience. But of course, for the commercial vehicle world, the cost is an important aspect, right? So we are trying to balance out building technology features of the future, but at the same time, not enforcing them onto the customers. It's only add ons, so they're not burdened when it comes to the pricing. Right. But we see a lot of advancements happening in the material world, semiconductor world, the AI world. It's only helping somebody like Hummingbird only get better in terms of our offerings to the end customer. So that's pretty much the future, the way we see it. And of course, we've already touched upon the next gen battery innovations. We have a close eye on what's happening in that world. We are always keen to bring those solutions as we continue to spend on the R&D as well within the company. So that's in a gist, that's what we're looking ahead for.
Bi-directional charging is a key feature of your systems. Can you explain the benefits of this technology for commercial fleets?
I think we briefly touched upon this before, but there are so the existing infrastructure that's on the vehicle, right? It's not utilized to its complete potential. For example, when we look at the whole lifetime of the vehicle, right? Battery is certainly the biggest limitation. But when it comes to power electronics, you can have a decade of lifespan for these systems, right? And especially systems like motors, they have a lot of passive components within these. And there's a lot of power distribution, electrical components, which are pretty much unused if you're not really driving. So what Hummingbird has innovated here is we are trying to reuse a lot of the components, especially on the power electronic side and the passive components that exist in your motor, to reuse them while the vehicle is stationary towards charging. So we are using the same IGBTs or the silicon carbides that's used for traction control, also for our charging control. And the way we do it is in a very isolated way. So your battery is always isolated from the grid. So if you want to charge the vehicle from the grid to the battery, it goes through the same unit. Even if you want to take power from our battery, which is DC power, and convert it into AC for the motor, it goes through the same unit. And even if you want to export power from one battery to another, which is DC power to another DC source, that again goes through the same unit. So what we've built is a very high power density single piece of hardware that can enable and allow multiple energy transfers, which can help monetize that vehicle as an asset for the end user. So they could use this to export power back to the grid, or somebody like AAA could use it for vehicle charging. So there's a lot of revenue generation that can happen through this innovative solution. It's patented within the company, and we're looking to also open to license it out to also other players if they feel the need for it, right? And there's immense cost benefit towards this as well, because we are using the same piece of hardware and we are utilizing the components. We're not adding any additional weight, or we're not adding any additional piece of equipment which would add on to the cost for the end customer.
Yes, and battery experts are saying that V2G actually improves the health of the battery because you're not at the extreme ends of the battery charge,
Yes,
right?
agree.
So it actually improves the battery's longevity and health. And you can make money during high demand peak times. So software and telematics play a crucial role in optimizing EV performance and efficiency. How does Hummingbird leverage data and software to enhance its products?
Yeah, software is a key aspect of what we do at Hummingbird. And this was a conscious decision that we took right from when we started the company, that we have to build our systems with software at the forefront. So it's sort of bringing life to a lot of the components which have previously been existing as just passive devices. Because with additional sensors in the vehicle, it's going to be additional cost, right? But what software allows you to do is utilize existing sensors to also make estimations. So right from the beginning, even before you talk about machine learning or AI algorithms running in your vehicle, there are a lot of control system algorithms that we've always built in the past, right from even when I started in the automotive world. These algorithms were very well evolved to use existing sensor data and make a lot of estimations. Because what this allows you to do in software, you can recreate the environment in which the vehicle is operating. You can recreate, or you can very well understand how the vehicle is responding to certain drive cycles in certain situations. And capturing all of this data is, and then optimizing the performance and building an engine out of it, is what Hummingbird has done in the past, right? And we focused a lot on the battery side as far as optimizing the performance is concerned. A lot of the machine learning algorithms that we've built in the past relates more with the state of health of the battery. How do we look at, how do we capture certain drive cycles and the data that comes along with it, right? You take a snapshot of a particular drive cycle, and you can, from your sensor data, you can exactly understand how the battery is behaving to that particular instant. And based on that, once you've captured that data, it's pretty limitless beyond that point, right? So you could either start optimizing, you could either provide that as information to the end user. Some of the predictive maintenance features that a lot of the fleet managers are requesting for today is, I need to understand if this vehicle can go in a particular route or not, right? So the dealerships have to start providing some sort of transparency there. And it sort of provides like a same playing field for all OEMs when you're able to allow data to propagate all the way to the end customer. But internally, telematics has been very key for us in terms of customer acquisition, because everybody is looking at a single platform where they can understand the health of the vehicle, they can understand which vehicle went on which route and what was the performance of that vehicle on that particular day and on that particular drive cycle. And tomorrow, with AI, we could integrate a lot of Gen AI solutions onto these fleet management softwares that could help fleet managers or somebody who's even non-technical to know everything about the vehicle and make better decisions on even which vehicle to buy tomorrow, which vehicle needs to go on which particular use case, and even in terms of warranty, right? When we in turn as an OEM work, our suppliers need data to understand, hey, where is the vehicle performing? Where is my cell being used, or where is my component being used? How is it performing? What's happening if it's in extreme temperatures? What's happening if there's high humidity? Because then it allows OEMs to have that easy dialogue with the suppliers when there is an actual issue, right? So software plays an extremely key role for us, not just in the internal optimization of efficiency alone or just providing telematics or fleet management information, but it's to connect suppliers, OEMs, dealerships, customers, and build that transparency end to end.
What are some of the most exciting projects or partnerships Hummingbird EV is currently working on that you can share with us?
Hummingbird has, with all this discussion, I hope you would realize the extent of the technology that Hummingbird has as a team, right? So it did not happen by accident. There is a much easier way we could have taken the path of working with suppliers and getting quickly putting together a vehicle and showcasing it to the world. What has been very motivating for us is the excitement is it has to be challenging for us. Now, anything that we had built so far is because there is no solution out there. That is the reason why we had gotten into our own battery design, because there was no flexibility in terms of the battery pack size, for example, or the C ratings or the energy capacity that each pack can take in. And the same goes with the charging and the powertrain. Because of the unique way that we have approached the powertrain is how the byproduct as this bidirectional charging came into play for us, right? So any project that we had taken up, from ag tractors to mining vehicles to refrigerated trucks, the towing platform, everything is driven around application where the solution did not exist. So that was the driving force for us. And in that process, we had built in this modularity into whatever we do, right? So now, with that said, I think what is also very important for Hummingbird is we are positioned well as a technology company where we are working with strategic partners going ahead to get to the scale in terms of volumes, right? Because so far, what we have done is a low volume game. It's primarily driven towards making our systems robust, making our systems compliant to standards, and making our systems to be cheaper. And now that we have accomplished that, the next phase for us is growth. Now, to tap into the growth is where Hummingbird is very categorically looking at getting into strategic partnerships. Now, that those can come in from few different angles, right? Whether it's from a contract manufacturing standpoint, whether it's from a customer standpoint, or whether it comes from a distribution and service standpoint. These three are sort of the three strategic areas of focus for us as Hummingbird. And from a customer standpoint, between the traction that we had in China in the mining vehicle space, we're furthering that relation into the next phase, while at the same time, we're getting into customer engagements like AAA project we had discussed about, and also try to be a solution provider to couple OEMs out there, which I can't take the names at this point, but you'll see, hopefully we'll get to that point in the next couple of months where you'll see some of strategic sort of partnerships built within the US to help them to deploy vehicles using Hummingbird tech. And our focus is primarily also in the two market segments. We are working very closely with one of the mobility players in the UAE market to tap into a couple thousand pieces year over year, beginning 2026. And we're partnered with and we're working closely with one of the largest e-commerce customers in India. I think all of these things we've touched upon earlier. So we are very realistic with in terms of volumes. We're not going into the projections of millions of trucks, millions of vehicles per year. I think it's proven that it's a failed case if we look at it from that perspective. It's more about valuing the technology and bringing in the partners that value the technology and providing the solutions that fit to the right markets at right scale. That's sort of where Hummingbird is really strategizing it, our next 2 years.
What are the key factors that will drive the mass adoption of electric commercial vehicles in the coming years?
See, again, I think this goes back to the earlier discussion we had. It's a very nascent industry. Now, people have to be aware of what's realistic in terms of volumes. Now, in order for the volumes to be driven exponentially higher to achieve the scale of what we call it as, where the consumer car market today is, we see that it's not something that will happen overnight, but over a decade. Now, with that said, what is very important for companies to do is not only look at building trucks for a specific market segment, because your supply chains are restricted, your customers are a handful of people, and the adoption becomes much harder, right? That's from a scalability standpoint. So you need to build something that can be catered across a wider audience, across multiple markets, that can fit multiple use cases while you're not really engineering all the time, right? So how do you accomplish that, and what do you do to make it happen is sort of what Hummingbird is focused on. We are focused on primarily on reducing the cost and making it incomparable to a diesel in the next 3 to 5 years to drive the volumes up. We are focused on scaling it in multiple markets at the same time to help our supply chain have a better purchasing power, again, driving towards that sustainability goals and the commercialization plans. But most importantly, I think everyone has this infrastructure, the constraint, right? So while we as a vehicle company, we can do certain things, like we had earlier talked about with the microgrids and the mobile charging and things like that. Really, I think the utility side of industry has to really step up to where they realize the regulations, they realize the power consumption, the demand over the next decades, and really support that plan going ahead, right? So one is, as an OEM, what can we do? And the second aspect of it is, as an infrastructure company or companies, how can you better position this to take in these vehicles, right? So these two are primarily the challenges, where one is the cost of the vehicles and the two is the grid infrastructure by itself.
How does Hummingbird EV contribute to the broader goal of creating a sustainable transportation ecosystem?
See, for us, it's more towards, we're driving towards creating a circular economy as a company, right? Now, what is that? It's a very broad statement, but what is that, right? So primarily, it's all about reducing, reusing, and remanufacturing. When you look at sustainability goals, it's also very important to really understand how the raw material is produced, where is it being used, what is the emissions that's contributing to create that end product, and how is it recycled. What we haven't touched upon so far, what we're really trying to do is decluster the manufacturing. Now, because we're positioning ourselves in multiple locations, whether you call it for geopolitical reasons or honestly to reduce the emissions, it's very important to produce going ahead vehicles in local market, right? It doesn't make sense for vehicles to be the raw material to come in from one country going into the other country or one state getting into the other state. It's more about how do you reuse the manpower, the material, and how do you minimize the emissions that you use to produce the vehicles outside to deliver it to the customers. I think that is primarily our focus. Where Vinay had mentioned, we've talked about this chassis platform of ours that come in play, where it's built out of recycled plastic, which can be locally manufactured at a very low capex, which needs minimum raw material, minimum infrastructure, and actually to produce and minimum energy requirements compared to the traditional players out there. It's more about how do we use from a chassis level up where we can really recycle and remanufacture. This is what we're sort of focused on, and we are driving this by what we call it as a micro factory. We are trying to localize the manufacturing where the movement of parts and emissions as a byproduct from movement of parts is reduced. And that will also enable the local workforce in multiple places to get empowered. So it's not going to get, we're not going to be choked with resource limitation out of locations, typically with all these big factories. With these micro factories, we can localize the employment, we can create a local supply chain, and the product by itself, what we have is built to be recycled. And lastly, I think reducing from a product standpoint, that's where the modularity comes in. So the batteries to the power electronics to the fabrication materials that we use, everything is common, to where we're not always re-engineering a new product line, which can create new scrap, which can only fit in X number of products, right? So the modularity is going to help us out with the recycling, to reduce the waste as well. So in general, it's more about getting these micro factories up, reducing the waste, reusing the product, and remanufacturing with these low capex micro factories.
Excellent. For aspiring entrepreneurs and engineers interested in the EV sector, what advice would you give them?
I think for entrepreneurs, right? So don't start with a business plan by itself, right? So you need to have a business plan that can support the technology, right? Or the technology supported by business plan. We have seen many companies more recently over the past four years where a lot of big high profile commercial vehicle companies in our space failed. That's because of a business plan, but without a product, right? So focus on product, focus on what is it the market is missing, and focus on how is it that you can bring in the difference, right? By looking outside of the standard templates. That is very important for any entrepreneur coming in, right? So you should be in a position to stand out with your product. Now, to the engineers, it's a very exciting space to be in, but you need to also be in a position to multitask. So the regular notion of if I'm a mechanical engineer, I just do drafting or I just work on the shop floor. Or if I'm an electrical engineer, I do a certain task. I think that has to little bit be gone, where you need to be a multitasker. You need to be in a position to talk about a vehicle in general. You need to know what's going on your vehicle. It doesn't really matter what your degree is. It doesn't really matter if you have a master's or a PhD. It's more be hands on, learn new things, multitask, always stay ahead of the change, right? So you need to keep learning all the time because it's a technology space where.
On my side, the space in which we are in, Ali, it can be a bit tough for any entrepreneur coming in. We've been in this space for 9 years. It's not like any software company, I would say, or an IT company, where it's been always easier to build solutions and scale up much faster. I think this is an industry where you have multiple dimensions, right? Engineering is just one part of it, and you have supply chain operations, manufacturing. So building a company in this space is going to come with its own challenges. I think my only advice will be it's a long game that you have to play. So endurance is going to be key, something that every entrepreneur in this space should be equipped with. From an engineer standpoint, like Rakesh mentioned, I think he's absolutely right. I think it's diversity is key. I think information knowledge is more easily available today than before. It's important to diversify yourself and not be just focused in one particular aspect. However, there are some subject matter experts who've done really well. But that's a limited crowd, right? But get into the details, right? I think problem solving is done by engineers mostly at the high level these days. It's important to dwell into the details and get to the root of it, and I think we'll be able to create better solutions that way.
Well, Rakesh and Vinay, this has been an incredibly informative and inspiring conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise and vision with us.
Thanks, Ali. I think thank you for hosting us, and we loved the conversation that we had, and thank you.
Yeah, we look forward to following your channel. Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us at Clean Titans. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, like, and ask questions in the comments, and we'll get you the answers. And stay tuned. Keep following us for more insightful and exclusive interviews from the world of clean energy and sustainability. Until next time, stay charged.